Hi, everyone. Welcome to another episode of Burnrate Baristas, where today we're going to be discussing negotiations. I'm Sahand.
And I'm Cate, and I'm going to pass the mic to our special guest.
Yeah, so we have an ex-colleague here joining us. Kyle, why don't you introduce yourself?
Nice to meet you. I'm Kyle. I was at Terra Cafe for 3 years doing finance and a lot of other things, as is natural with a startup. And now I work helping kind of other startups just with a lot of what I've learned. So happy to be here.
Thanks for coming. So we thought it'd be pertinent to have Kyle here for this conversation. This was not planned. We had a topic that we wanted to cover, which was negotiations. And we thought, who better than to have our ex-head of Stratfin here walking us through some of the things we had to figure out as a team through the three years and change?
3 years and change.
3 years and change that we had together. So negotiations, not necessarily the most fun thing, especially when things get intense, but are table stakes in any startup environment. So we thought it'd be kind of fun to give you a sense of what that's looked like for us, what we've gone through, what we're going through maybe in some instances, and some takeaways and guidance based on our experience. Negotiations truly span the entire spectrum of the business, whether it's with a manufacturer, a software vendor, an agency partner, a financing partner, what have you. Virtually every relationship you establish has some element of this. Also with virtually every customer, right? Kyle, you've been with us through a lot of growth, a lot of ups and downs. You've experienced a lot with us. I'm sure it had no bearing on your decision to pursue other pastures. But yeah, give us a sense of whichever example you want to give of giving just a sense of what's something you've experienced on the negotiation front with any of the partners that you're a part of, because you played a big role in a lot of those conversations internally and also in discussions with those vendors.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's two things. It's one, it's realizing that I think like every win is important because it has a lasting impact, especially when we're growing as a business.
Yeah.
And two, it's just like I think learning the full process in terms of like what goes into a negotiation, like both from the financial impact and also like the psychological kind of negotiations of it as well.
Yeah.
I remember my time is my first like real negotiation was with a key vendor of ours. I remember kind of going through the full cycle, evaluating different competitors, and when we landed at one, it's like, how do we kind of approach that? I think it's first is like establishing internally, what is that going to do for our business? And like, where do we draw the line if we're actually willing to walk away?
Right.
Then there's kind of like the negotiation part. It's like,
Can you say in what realm of vendors? I know we don't want to say any specific names, but are we talking about the software vendors? We're talking about financing partners here.
this is a software firm that kind of helps, that protects our machines.
Right.
In a sense, right? There is a component that also is like a little bit of chess, like understanding that their list price isn't actually the final price that they can provide to us. So I think it's kind of learning how to go back and forth, and kind of like when we want to go back to the table, it's providing sound reasoning and being patient. I think that like not speaking first, like letting them come to you is important. I remember the sales rep called me multiple times, and I regret giving him my number, but we'll live with it. But it's like remembering not to kind of react in that moment and really kind of coming with like a more level mindset that there is no rush to sign. There is no rush to kind of do anything.
How much were you prepping ahead of those? Like, were you said you go out and get, you have multiple offers, or at least you're looking at multiple vendors for potentially, let's say, the same service, right? And that's, I would say like takeaway number one is building optionality. Like that effectively becomes leverage in the negotiation. But like, what other guiding, principles do you have when you're going through the process of whether you're at the start of the negotiation or in the middle of it? And just give people a sense of a little bit more about that experience in terms of like, what are you prepping before you're going into those meetings?
Yeah, I think it's prepping first, like the competition and like, what is the different pricing or different kind of like offering set that different vendors have, but then also internally, like I, as a finance person, like to talk to the other department and say like, what is this really going to do for our business? Like, is it really going to elevate it? Like, and how important is it? And then I think that you can negotiate on multiple terms, not just pricing.
Right.
It's like,
people monolithically just dial in on the number.
Right, where it's like the actual service that they provide, like the remedies if like a machine breaks down. There are a lot of nuances to the contract that goes beyond the pricing. Yeah. And that was an important consideration to me. It's like, okay, that is just one point that we can talk about, but if we can't budge on that, what else can we talk about at the negotiating table?
Yeah, I remember vividly. There was one technology partner that we worked with early on for the TKO2, and I remember vividly. We were just getting started, and the the guy was very jovial. I mean, a lot of sales reps are, so you got to take that with a grain of salt. But I vividly remember him not ironing out certain details in the contract that we were looking at. So there are certain things outside of the dollar amount that we were going to be paying about the services, like the SLAs and like the commitments we were going to make. And he kept doing this, like, Sahand, you have my word. You have, I swear on my wife, on my mother, on my, whatever. Like, anyone this guy had ever come into contact with, he swore that, gentleman's agreement. Let's shake hands. We'll figure that out. But let's get signed and let's get started. That guy lasted at that company for maybe 18 months, 16 to 18 months, and was gone. Like, there are a lot of people that lean on their personal reputation. There are a lot of people that lean on relationships that they're like, you have my word, I have your back. And it's almost like a way to accelerate the process to get to a signed contract. And as nice as that might be, that could be purely genuine and authentic in terms of like their actual intention. But the reality of it is, if you want to just take someone on their word because they want to move faster, one, you have to look at their incentives. So are they incentivized to get this deal done as fast as possible? Do they have a quota that they need to hit? Is there a number that they're trying to get moving? And then also just, in the negotiation portion of like getting deep into the weeds of the contract, which I know you were really good at, just really going through the weeds of, looking at all the fine print, it is there for a rainy day. Yeah. When things are all gravy and you're both growing and making money, look, everything is solvable. Like, it's very, very easy. You can point to the contract, but more often than not, people are like, look, let's just come to a mutual agreement if something needs to change, if everybody's growing. But in those instances where things get tough, where maybe there's a delay in shipment, and that, delays, therefore, revenues or delays growth or what have you, those are the moments that you have to point back to. And we've had that a lot of times, with different service partners from the more kind of, let's say, like operations side of the house. Is we've had things that are like force majeure, like, act of God, if you will, kind of scenarios where like natural disasters happen, and it was very sad, and we were exercising a lot of empathy and patience and understanding. But in the reality, we were kind of shocked when it was like, okay, well, let's go back to the agreement. Like, oh, let's look at the contract. Like, we're happy to do that, but at the end of the day, like, we just need to make sure we're getting a service, and then also we're communicating clearly with each other. And I really think one of the most important things to emphasize is that the going through the process, like, if it makes you uncomfortable to negotiate and go through that, just reminding both yourself as well as the other party that this is not to be difficult. This is not to split hairs and exhaust everybody, but it really is in those instances where, look, the unforeseeable or, the unimaginable happens that you have to try and mitigate around. Like, that's where, yes, people, whether you like it or not, you're going to end up going back to the terms you agreed upon. So you better make sure you're protected as a startup. That, to your point about list price, no startup that I know of can just pay the list price on everything. They have to put in protections for themselves to be able to sustain and then be able to stick around to service customers.
Can I add one thing?
You can.
You talked about uncomfortable.
Yeah.
Like, the first time, it was really uncomfortable to do it. But I think that's how you learn to be able to do this better. Like reading kind of, what the other person is saying. I felt like by the end of my time here at Terra Cafe, if Sahand was like, can you negotiate this contract? I'd have no issue doing it. I'm like, oh, I've been through the ringer. I know how to do it. So it is a little bit of like practice to it.
Now you know where it all comes from. Sahan's like, no, negotiate more. I'm not a monster. Set the monster.
All right, Sahand. So you say you're not a monster, yet we've all learned from you. I want to hear, what is the toughest negotiation you've faced?
Okay, so the toughest negotiation I've faced. I don't know if this will be the toughest per se, because I'd have to actually like really go back and go through all of them. But there's one in particular that comes to mind that I think had the biggest material impact to the business. And it was specifically, back to your point, which is interesting because it wasn't really about price, but it was the manufacturing partner we were picking for the TKO2.
Yeah.
And the reason I say the materiality is probably the biggest impact to the overall business is because there was one manufacturer that I really wanted. Like, it is, I would argue, globally the most polished, highest quality manufacturing partner we could have gotten for our category. I knew them since the beginning of the company. I pitched them really hard on the TKO1, unsuccessfully. See other episodes of what it takes to build a startup and all the failures you have to go through. Unsuccessfully pitched them, did not land them. We were very happy with our TKO1 manufacturer, but at the end of the day, our first choice was someone else. When it came to the TKO2 process, I was just hell-bent on landing this manufacturing partner.
Can confirm.
Yes. And when we talked about the technology, when we talked about the angling, what we wanted the product to be able to accomplish, what we wanted to be able to do, what newness we were bringing to the category, they got very excited. Very excited. So much so that their CEO was like, I want to spend time on this project personally. And then we still had them drag their feet because there were so many subcommittees. They had their own board, their own governance, their own head of international sales. Like, hey, this brand is still relatively young. Do we want to focus on them? They were working with the biggest brands globally. So they were looking at us. They were like, this is this up-and-coming challenger brand, but we traditionally work with brands with decades of history that, frankly, had a much bigger scale. They were in Europe and all over the globe. So I remember pitching them really hard, but we really couldn't get them going. That was over several weeks and actually even months of trying to pitch them. Then we had the first industrial designs. So all the stuff we did with the ammunition.
Yeah.
We started feeding them. Like I had done this strategically with the O1 because our assets looked beautiful. All the photo shoots, video shoots, UGC that we were getting. We were like strategically just titrating all of that out to them to be like, this is what we're doing. This looks like nothing else in the category. Especially at that time, really it was almost just like Sega Genesis and Apple. You know, I wouldn't even call it Samsung and Apple. Like we were just so far ahead of everyone else. Not to toot my own horn, but just across the board, the design spectrum of what we were putting out there, the story we were trying to tell was very different. So then we started showing them the industrial designs. They got even more excited. We started to chip away. We got even more people excited, We had one huge holdout internally that was just like sinking their heels in, we're not moving forward with you. And the CEO was still spending time with us. So he stayed in weekly meetings with us every week, talking about the project, kind of almost like not feigning interest and excitement. He was genuinely putting in the time, but we weren't making any massive strides in the development because they frankly just weren't putting resources internally behind it. You needed more than a CEO. It takes a village truly to build a complex hardware product, and we needed so many stakeholders involved to be able to actually accelerate the process. And we noticed they weren't layering in any resources. So all of the things we needed to actually catapult the project forward, we weren't getting. And then I had to make a call. And this was a really scary call. Like for me personally, when I say like being uncomfortable, like I was very uncomfortable, which was me saying, we're dropping you. You're not on the project anymore.
Yeah.
And he said, well, how are you going to make this then? Because he also knew we wanted the better technology that they had in terms of the brute unit, the complexity, the controls that they had. It was really important for all the functionality we wanted within the TKO2. And I was like, I'm going to just figure it out because this isn't working. And we're dragging our feet. We have investors. We have timelines we need to hit. We don't have the luxury for this to keep waiting. And I said, I don't care. We'll have to just figure it out. So you're either selling us your parts, the technology that we needed, or we're going to find it from someone else. Just let me know by this day what you're doing. And I gave him a hard date because there were so many deadlines that came and went about him up-resourcing our project where I was like, I can't adequately communicate or honestly communicate to our internal teams or external stakeholders what the timeline is because they keep missing deadlines of ramping up. And when I finally was like, just let us know by this date if you're going to sell us the parts for these things, because if not, we're moving forward. And then we started building optionality. We did our own sourcing project. We found people with comparable technology that we could have worked around. It would have been a workaround, would have been complicated, would have been costly, but I was like, that's our path. That was the day that he was like, on that day, he was like, I've gotten everybody involved. We're around the table. We're pushing forward. This is what we're going to do. They did have some asks of their own. So it didn't come as like a blanket yes. There were conditions. But at the end of the day, like God's honest truth, we needed them to cooperate with us to actually hit our price targets, to actually get the product out on time, and to have the product quality meet the standard we wanted. If it wasn't for that moment, which again, like, you have to be very careful with the walk away. Like if you're like, I'm walking and you don't walk, you've just lost all of your leverage and you've lost all of the ability to ever really, I don't want to use the word threaten, but you know what I mean? Like, like
your credibility.
Yeah. It's gone. So there's no more bite to any bark, if you will. And I remember that day because I was like, we'll see what he says. And we'll like, whatever he decides, like the mentality you have to have, especially in the, you know, an entrepreneurial mindset in the early stage startup side is like, I'm going to figure it out. It's like what we talked about last time. It's like, I don't need to have everything solved. I need to believe everything is solvable.
Yeah.
And so that was the mentality I went into it, to try and get comfortable with whatever the outcome would be. And I think this is like right around the time you were starting.
Right, because that would have been like mid 2021, right?
Yeah, it was, It had to have been mid. When did you start?
Late 2021, early 2022?
Yeah, so like literally right, so it's like right around that time, because at that point we were like more than half a year into like making progress, but in reality, like not making any progress. Yeah. And I was like, okay, this can't go on like this. And so that's the one that comes to mind. But now I'm curious, I'll flip it back to you. I realize it's a really long story. Like, what is your toughest negotiation that comes to mind?
I think just to preface it, you know, my obsession, right, is brand equity, brand reputation, just the public sentiment around Terra Cafe. So when there are negotiations that come into my category, right, it's usually some sort of tool or service or business partner that affects the experience our customers have. That's virtually everything in the CX tech stack is going to influence how somebody experiences our brand at various touch points.
Right.
So I remember, and it was just, it sticks out in my head because it just put us in such a tough position, but we had we'll just call them a technology service provider.
Okay.
And their cooperation had the ability to directly affect how customers were using or not using their machines.
Yeah.
So and this I think is something that any early stage company has to look out for, they had general counsel. We do not.
That's always fun when they can throw back their GC.
Well, I think sometimes, especially like companies that are a bit larger, think that they can take advantage of smaller companies and kind of just say, well, we're just turning off service unless you do everything we want, which was essentially their threat to us. You know, they're like, you know, they were ready to leave dozens, potentially even hundreds of our customers hanging out to dry. Because this company, and we don't know this for sure, but from where we were sitting, looked like they were in dire trouble. You know, we were dealing with a new point of contact every other day until eventually our point of contact was that company's CFO. And we were trying to make
I know which one you're talking about.
You know, and we had somebody very close to us.
We're trying hard not to name names.
So this company though was prepared to let many of our customers completely hung out to dry. And I remember, you know, they put forth an addendum to the contract because they just realized they needed to be charging us more or less, was like what it came down to. And I remember somebody very, very close in our advisory circle said, you know, it just signed the addendum, like you're not going to get better than this. And I remember talking to you, I was like, no, this is not true. We can absolutely get better than this.
I remember that.
This is not going to be what it looks like to do right by our customers. So, you know, you kind of do that whole dance similar to when I first started and I'd be on the phone with a customer, you know, like millennials do this and like Gen Alpha do this for phone,
no, they don't.
For phone signal.
No, they don't.
Like we do this. They apparently do this, like a little cell phone. But similar to in the beginning in the company when I'd be like, hold on, I have to ask our head of product, Sahand, or hold on, I have to ask our manager. And then it was like, hello, I'm also the manager. But, you know, in this instance, it was
just practicing different
like,
accents and voices.
Oh, yeah. But in this case, you know, it was, you know, we have conferred with our legal advisory services, which was me and you, and here's what we're prepared to do. And we went back and forth with them, and there were so many iterations. And to what Kyle was saying, like, you can't just look at the number. You can look at, you know, what is the duration you're given or, you know, contracted to. What does renewal look like? Is there any
same dollar amount, more deliverables?
Right. Yeah, exactly. Is there exclusivity, or can I go and, you know, bring on another partner to do whatever it is? So we ended up getting everything we wanted with that one. But I think
I
like,
remember you pushed us so far beyond what everyone else was suggesting too,
Yeah.
because frankly, like it wasn't that you were in the wrong to push harder on
Mm-hmm.
it. It was like fundamentally
Right.
people were like, we need to move on. And even if we're being treated unfairly, we just have so many things,
Right.
like so many irons in the fire that we have
Right.
to get to. Let's just call it a day.
Right.
And you were like, I think we should push for what is just.
for our
And
customers.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, because ultimately, like, that's who would have been affected by it,
Yep,
right?
yep.
It's our customers, and what we told them they were entitled to.
Yeah.
They wouldn't have been receiving that, and
Yeah.
that's that's not fair, and it's just not how we try to do business.
Yeah. I brought up this topic because I love this topic. And I don't love it because I love negotiations, despite despite the very accurate representation that in many instances I will say, like, I think we need to push harder here. It is really ultimately to make sure that we are a stable, sustainable, and
Right.
growing business so that we can do more for our customers. But the reality of it is so deeply ingrained into the day-to-day of running a business, whether it's big or small. And for me, I think just shedding light on what that looks like, because it is at times really uncomfortable, sometimes incredibly hard, or what can feel is unjust or is legitimately unjust, but frankly, just based off of scale and leverage, you just might not have as much ability to push and pull on levers versus somebody who just says, we're just going to discontinue service or unless you do everything we want. And of course, everyone likes to think that, like, yeah, but everything is contractually obligated. You just go back to the agreement and you look at the legal framework and make sure that if somebody does something wrong, you take them to court. It very, very seldom works like that in practice. And that's what I wanted to just talk about today. Do you feel like there's anything that we could capture, like bullet points of some of the topics we've touched on as far as guidance for other people that might be going through the same thing?
I remember the day that I learned that list price isn't final price was unbelievable to me earlier in my career. Could not believe that. So know that both numbers and terms are negotiable. Know that even when it feels uncomfortable, remember why you're doing that. Like you said, we want to build a stable organization for our employees and our community that is around for years to come. And that, includes being able to continue being customers of the parties we're negotiating with, or, whatever the relationship is. What do you have?
Two, one, I think any brand that's consumer facing, yes, you're negotiating with vendors and customers. I'm sure every brand is dealing with that. The other, just that I think that, even though you're dealing with this, you always have a team that's kind of behind you to help, whether that's kind of working with you or Brandon, who used to work here, talking to other people.
Great shout out to Brandon.
Great shout out to Brandon.
Yeah.
But
Brandon taught me everything I know about negotiation.
It was amazing.
you did.
I was the grasshopper.
I think that's also really important. You're not just the only one kind of doing this yourself. There is a team aspect to this as well.
Right. I'll hit a few bullets. Most of what we talked about, but just as a quick recap. Build in optionality to the extent that you have multiple offers to kind of lean into. It gives you more leverage, and frankly, in most instances you will have more than one option as far as the path forward. Two, remember that there's asymmetric information. You're not going to know everything on their side. Try to understand as much as what's important to the other party. That's not necessarily always to use it to your advantage. It can also just be to understand them better, understand their incentives, understand their motivations, and how that aligns with your business needs or objectives. Three, if you have a walkaway, set that walkaway before you go into the negotiation. Do not let emotions or the desire to want to close a deal conflate or cloud your judgment in the moment, because negotiations can get emotional. There are many times I've had people be like, why are you doing this? Or, or not even like that. Like, it's like, they might want to project an image that you're being the villain or something like that. Like a lot of times those are actually emotionally manipulative tactics to be able to get even more for themselves, even if they had more wiggle room to negotiate, which brings me to my next point, which is having what's called a ZOPA or zone of potential agreement. So understanding kind of what that range is for you. So I think you kind of talked on this, not necessarily coming right out the gate with what your walkaway is if you have that, but also being mindful of the freezing effect of negotiation, which would be kind of the next bullet, is that you over negotiate too hard, you freeze the other side. Empirically and statistically has proven that you've had to overcompensate and over offer concessions to bring them back to the table if you just do something outlandish and they're like, I don't even want to work with this person. And then lastly, and I think maybe the most important one is still, at the end of the day, for a lot of instances, whether it's a customer, software vendor, manufacturer, or what have you, like these are long-term partners, and you should look at it as a partnership. So you're trying to solve things together. I think as much as you might be on opposite sides of the table, if you can almost kind of do like a little bit of mental voodoo jujitsu to like arrive at the place where you're thinking like you are on the same side of the table, I think it's incredibly helpful psychologically to make your ask as you need them, but still consider the other party's interests in mind, which kind of goes back to the first point, but just reorienting the thinking. Anything else?
Great.
Very good.
Yeah.
Thanks for watching. See you on the next one.